Alright, hey guys. I'm coming today to talk to you about main supports and just a lot of different things about them. So, how the role is somewhat changed over time, the ability to flex for main support players, and I think some main supports and flex supports that have kind of like changed roles and just how the role has changed over time. So, let's go first with Anna. Anna's become more prevalent as a main support recently, and then I'd say in like the past, I don't know, 9 months or so, where she was almost exclusively played as like main support would play Lucio, flex support would play Anna, and so it's kind of changed in the fact that now it's kind of anyone's job depending on the comp that you're playing. So having a main support that's able to play her at a high enough level is actually like really impactful, and we've seen that for a couple different teams. So like Fusion University was like one of the best examples of they're able to play Anna Zen where other teams just aren't able to, and it really puts themselves at like a very big advantage over some teams that literally can't match it. So there's a couple of different instances here. So I guess I'll go over some of the examples of kind of like flex supports that have turned into main supports and it's been like good for them, or they were kind of just in that position before. So I think Custa is probably like the biggest one where he was a he I know his wording whenever he joined Dallas Fuel was I can play whatever hero, so whatever Harry can't play or Chips can't play, I'll play. And he ended up becoming like the stable main support on that team, and then later on Valiant being able to be a very effective main support because his calling was good and his hero pool fit for that team. Where the ability to play Mercy and Zen, or it was Mercy and Lucio at the time, but he could play all the heroes, but it worked best that he would play Lucio or Mercy because Harry struggled at Mercy, Chips couldn't play Lucio, so it kind of fit in that role where he was like good caller, could play the heroes that they needed, and then he worked very good on Valiant. So he was a flex support before, but I think that transition to main support really worked for him. Bonnie is another example where he was a flex support before on FN or GFE, and then he teamed up with Raucus, and so Raucus was the better flex support, so it worked better for him to transition into main support, but it also was the fact that Boink wasn't as good at Mercy as he was, so it was like he would just fill in that role even though the hero pool thing was a little bit different, so it was just mostly he would fill in that role as the main support, but it was just because Mercy was prevalent in the meta, but he's basically become the main support of the team because he had majority of the playtime. Then another example, I know a lot of people are going to hate Zebosai now, but before he was a flex support, he played a lot of different things, so he gave his team a lot of flexibility because he used to play Widow, he played Anna, he played Zen, and then he transitioned because he didn't remain at that same high level, so he remained at a lower level as time went on, so he changed into the main support role, and it didn't work for him really. His Lucio was still probably pretty good, but Mercy was like the meta for the majority of the Overwatch League, so he really struggled. And then there's some examples of main supports that kind of started to phase out of the meta, who were really strong before. So, for example, Doc was probably a fourth best player on his team on Selfless. He was a really good main support. His Lucio was very aggressive. He was really strong. He was a good caller, but Mercy becomes more meta, and he kind of just starts to phase out of the meta. Toby was another one. He was an insanely good Lucio player. Lunatic High was an insanely good team because of how good he was able to peel, keep Jaehong alive. They really excelled at baiting teams into them, and then he would counter peel for that. Again, Mercy becomes meta. He struggles a lot. Harry Hook is another example. His Lucio was extremely good. Something that was a bit weird was like, why wasn't Harry able to pick up Zen or other aim supports as strong as his hit scan was? Because his soldier was a top tier level before, and he'd play hit scan on ladder all the time, but then he wasn't able to make that transition where he basically was like a hit scan player that can play Lucio, and he wasn't able to play that like flex support role that I'd say Envious Fuel kind of needed near the end. Joe Meister was another example, and Verbo, they kind of in the same bank of like teams that were like on pretty good teams. Their strength on Lucio was really good, their calling was good, but as soon as Mercy became meta, they basically became outclassed and they got replaced on their teams. I'd say main supports that were like on the rise and then have kind of been like showing themselves to be like, hey, main supports are actually good players that you should have on your team and they should be very skilled are players like Elk, Moth, and Slime. I'd say all of them are very capable players of playing all three of these supports. So Anna, Mercy, and Lucio, which is very important for a lot of these teams that want to be flexible, that want to have the best chance of winning. So having members that are able to flex and play multiple heroes that are like very skilled based. So like especially coming into season one, you'd say, wow, Doc's a great Lucio player. And then once Mercy and like Anna is like required to play, you'd say, we need to get a more skilled main support player. Moth was that example of he had a ton of time on Mercy, had a ton of time on Lucio, so it was very easy for him to transition and basically become that player that they needed, where Doc really couldn't fill that role. And so getting a more skilled, younger player seems to be the solution for some of these teams, and maybe that is going to be the solution going forward. It is you just have more skilled main support players that have a larger hero pool, where before it was basically just you play Lucio if you're a main support. That's all you play. That's all you play on ladder. That's all you play in scrims. You're a caller bot. You call. You don't have to be very skilled. And I think that's really transitioned and changed over time as we've seen the prevalence of more heroes. So Anna is a little bit more specific in the fact that I think you can run comps where you just run Lucio Anna. It isn't as effective as Anna Zen can be, because Anna Zen technically has the highest ability to do the most damage output, have the most healing, the most versatility, where you can play much longer range. So it is nice if you have a main support that can do that. That isn't the most relevant one, but you can see that the teams that have it have been able to play like very flexible comps, and you've seen that the main supports that have basically been stuck on it. So there was a lot of 2CP played, I'd say probably stage 2, and then there was a bunch in contenders where if you weren't able to play Anna on main support, then your team was going to struggle because they were going to miss a lot of shots, and then your team was going to be able to have the same amount of sustain, but you needed to pick it because of how strong it was. So you saw some teams really struggle with that. Mercy was the big one. All the older Lucio players who were basically just called Lucio players weren't able to pick that up. So that was the example of like Verbo, Joe Meister, Doc, Toby, Harry Hook to some extent. They really weren't able to pick up Mercy, and so they kind of fell off, and they weren't able to like maintain that same level where in the meta before you could say they are dominant, good Lucio players and they're really strong on their team. You move this meta where it's only Mercy being played, and they really start to phase out, and their teams start to replace them. Their teams start to drop down in level, and they aren't really able to like stay at that same level just because of one hero being changed, and it was because they were just good at Lucio. And so that Mercy change really switched this, like it's really switched the team comp and how some of these players were able to like maintain their jobs, and some of them are just being phased out now, where you don't even see the old guard of Lucio's really staying around unless they're going to like be a second string player and then just sit on the bench for the majority of the season. And then I'd say now that we've even like made this swap to Lucio being the main thing, there was a couple of people who swapped from like flex support to main support. So that was Custa, Bonnie, Zebo. I'm trying to think of there's probably other ones out there, but there was players who were only flex support players before, so they were basically playing Zen full time. Maybe they played Anna, maybe they played Mercy, but they were playing that flex position. So switching the role around and having it now be that they're playing Lucio more often. Sometimes they don't even have as much playtime. So I'd say for like Bonnie, maybe Custa. There's probably a couple others that I can't think of at the time, but they make that role swap, and they're not actually able to play Lucio when the meta had swapped. So you could see some of them struggle. They wouldn't be able to build the same ult charges a normal Lucio would be able to play, where as a Lucio, you're expected to be tagging people mid-fight, expected to be like finishing off kills, getting boops correctly, saving beat for proper instances. So I feel like the flex supports that haven't been able to pick it up as efficiently, who have transitioned into main supports because they were just Mercy or something that needed to be swapped for a team, have then struggled in the fact that they can't play Lucio. Well, the old guard of Lucio's really got phased out because Mercy started to become more meta. So there's kind of been this switch in the meta where the importance of main support has been a lot of different things. The ability to play Mercy has been the most prevalent for most of Overwatch League as we've known it, but the ability to play Anna is highly valued, and the ability to be a strong Lucio has also been kind of phased out, but I think it's coming back now that it's a playable hero again, where it's actually pretty strong, and some of the players that have switched roles might need to start picking up heroes more often so that they can remain relevant in the scene.